This story happened when I was working as a security guard at a morgue. The morgue belonged to one of the medical universities. Many strange rumors and scary legends had accumulated about this place over the long years of its existence, which I never believed. I studied at the same university. Money was constantly in short supply, so I had to find a job. Thanks to my kind teacher for the fact that I have two jobs, a morgue attendant and a security guard. I'm a simple country boy who came to conquer the metropolis. My parents are not rich, but they managed to buy me a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. I studied quite well, despite being busy. I tried to combine work and study, but that's not the point. The work was on the campus of the university. I didn't have to go far. You went down to the basement, walked a couple of dozen meters, and you are already at work. Like many similar institutions, the morgue was underground. The building had not been repaired for about 20 years, maybe more. The damp and gloomy corridors were barely illuminated by flickering old daylight bulbs. There were a few doors on the sides. There was a lecture room and two cold rooms that held corpses. There was also a room with organic preparations. I was there once. Nothing unusual. I saw a big zinc barrel with hands and feet floating in a special solution. There was also a small crematorium. It was used to incinerate unusable waste. There was also a plumbing system where blood and other wastes were drained. My workstation was near the service entrance. It had everything I needed: a kettle with a microwave oven, and even Wi-Fi, to which I learned the password in the first days of work. Apart from YouTube, I didn't need anything else. I liked to listen to scary stories with frightening headlines at night. It was business as usual. I took my shift and waited for everyone to go home. The last to leave was our nurse Emma, who was just collecting the keys to the offices and handing them to me. Nothing boded ill for the duty. I brewed some coffee, opened YouTube on my tablet, and turned on some scary story. And I started perusing the medical literature. The sound of the ringtone made me jump in my seat. I almost fell off my chair. The doctor on duty, John, called and asked me to open the door. I hung up the phone and walked out of the duty doctor's room. After opening the main door, I walked out into the courtyard, looked at the clock, and was surprised. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning. Time flies by while reading. A siren sounded in the distance. An ambulance pulled up to the old building, and two men who looked like each other got out. John, who appeared nearby, began to ask the men who they had brought in. One of the men said that they had brought in a girl in her 20s. The friends were driving after a party and hit a truck loaded with rebar. The truck's belts came off, and the rebar fell on their car. John opened the bag and I almost threw up. What was in the bag only remotely resembled a human being. It was more like mincemeat. By the time we went out for one last smoke, it was light out. The job was done. The cause of death was established. The girl died of multiple injuries and fractures incompatible with life. The body was cleaned up as best as possible. I filled out the paperwork and went home. At home, I lay on my bed and fell asleep instantly, forgetting to charge my phone. I slept until the evening and only woke up when it started to get dark. I prepared some food, turned on my laptop, and decided to watch some movie. The situation that happened during the night occasionally appeared in his mind, showing realistic fragments. It's not every day you see such gruesome corpses. I finished the movie and fell asleep right on the couch. I woke up to the alarm clock ringing. I got up and almost threw it away. I remembered it was a cell phone. I couldn't figure out what scared me. The usual school day began. A lot of texting and constant walking around the classrooms. After lunch, our group, led by the professor, went to a lecture in the neighboring building. We decided to cut through the basement, so as not to scare the townspeople with the faces of future surgeons. Our basement is old and interesting, with its own unique atmosphere. I liked it for some reason. It was both creepy and peaceful at the same time. The way down to the basement was right in the lecture hall. The entrance was decorated with marble, and at the bottom there was a big iron staircase. As we descended it, we saw a dimly lit room with a low ceiling lined with large metal pipes. We were walking along the corridor discussing something when suddenly, In the middle of the damp-smelling basement, the lights suddenly went out. Everyone turned on flashlights, but it was as if they didn't illuminate anything. Only faces and figures were visible. People were panicking and didn't know what was happening. They were trying to see something in the dark and shining their lights in each other's eyes. I tried not to panic. This place was familiar to me. Suddenly there was a sound that I still fear to this day, to the point of trembling. It sounded like someone dragging a crowbar or an axe across the concrete floor. We all froze. The sounds gradually died down, and we heard someone's body collapse onto the concrete floor. One of the girls screamed loudly. The lights came on and I saw my friends standing scared. Everyone else stood motionless at first, and then ran for the exit. Once outside, we found that one girl from our group was missing. While we were arguing about whether to go down to look for her or not, the police arrived. We told them what happened in the basement. 10 people can't go crazy at the same time. The cops searched the basement, but they never found the girl. People started disappearing down there. A man decided to go through the basement, but he never made it to the right place. He never came back. We've had 2 of these cases this week. It's like the police have moved in. People started avoiding the basement. And I had a night shift coming up. I packed up and took the evening bus to the right stop. When I arrived, there was almost no one in the morgue. A doctor and 2 orderlies on duty. Smoking on the porch, we went our separate ways. I went to the security room and they went to clean up. A few minutes later, one of the orderlies called. Started talking in an agitated voice about some blood. I thought it was a prank, but on the way to the orderlies I got scared. What could men who have worked here for decades see? I opened the door. The whole room was covered in blood. The men were standing in the far corner. After seeing that, I threw up. For about 5 minutes, the 3 of us stood there scared and didn't know what to do in such a situation. Then something happened that made us run away from there. From the openings of the zinc tables, where blood and dirty water after washing the corpses is drained. The rotten blood mixed with blackened pieces of human meat spurted out. After seeing that, we ran out of the room and headed outside. I slammed the door on the way out. The street greeted us with the evening chill and many twinkling lights. We called the director and smoked nervously on a bench near the entrance, waiting for him. The director arrived quickly. When he entered the morgue, his anger changed to gag reflexes. The cause of what had happened remained unclear until the plumbers arrived. They found a rat-eaten human corpse in one of the sewers. We almost vomited again from the disgusting odor. The corpse was lying against the far wall. There was almost nothing left of a human being. The cops did the paperwork, and we were finally allowed to go home. At home, I sat on the couch, and after the 4th beer my eyes began to close. I put the rest of the beer on the coffee table and fell asleep. Sleep after the events I had experienced was disturbing. I was walking through incomprehensible basements and endless labyrinths, with rusty doors and walls blackened from dampness and mold. In the darkness I could hear unintelligible whispers everywhere. I realized that I was dreaming and that I was lying on my couch. The whispering intensified and I instantly jumped up. I sat up and greedily inhaled the air with my mouth. It was 6 in the morning on the clock. I got up from the couch and immediately stepped into something wet with both feet. After that, I ran straight to the bathroom. I flicked the light switch in the room, but the light never came on. I reached the bathroom in the dark. Some kind of liquid squelched under my feet. I opened the door and turned on the light. In the light of the lamps, I could see that murky, dirty water with blood was gushing out of the overflowing tub and sink. I stood there with my mouth open. There was no strength to say or do anything. Suddenly, 2 bloody human hands reached out from the thick liquid filling the tub. I felt like I was going to die of fear. I stood there and felt as if my feet had been driven into the concrete floor with construction nails. I lowered my gaze and screamed in terror. The nails were sticking out of my feet. I stood powerless and stared at what was happening. Meanwhile, the creature had already half climbed out of the bathroom. Muddy, dirty blood was dripping from its black hair. The creature pulled the hair apart with its hands and I nearly passed out. It had only one eye in the middle of its face, and a long elongated mouth with 3 rows of sharp teeth. The monster climbed out of the tub with an eerie sound and stood on the blood-soaked floor. A new wave of fear went through my body. The thing had no legs at all. Instead, they were long human arms with large palms. My heart nearly stopped when the lights went out. I heard the creature coming toward me and tried to run away, but my feet were nailed to the floor. My body swayed and I hit my head on the slippery floor. I woke up in my bed, keeping my feet up on the couch. I looked around the floor and the room. I couldn't believe I was finally awake. I then went to the bathroom and opened the door. The monsters and blood weren't there. A little later, I cleaned myself up, had a snack, and drove to the university. The sky, covered with clouds, foretold heavy rain. When I got to the university, I saw a message from my partner asking me to fill in for him. I agreed. The school day flew by quickly. Everyone at the university was talking about one piece of news. A missing girl from my group was found in one of the back rooms of the morgue. The plumber who found the body was taken to a psychiatric hospital. What he saw drove him crazy. As always, there are more questions than answers. Who did this to her and why? Why couldn't anyone find her? Even though everyone was looking for her more than once. Neither the police nor the students had any answers. At home, I quickly made dinner and started getting ready for work. Something inside me told me that it was going to be a rough night. The closer I got to work, the more anxious I became. It seemed like something incredibly scary was about to happen. But pushing those thoughts aside, I opened the doors and walked into the morgue. There was almost no one in the building. Just me and the 2 orderlies on duty who were sitting in the staff room. I decided to make myself a coffee and put the kettle on. Only I relaxed with a mug of hot drink as a strange scraping sound was heard. It sounded as if someone had run a nail through the concrete. The scraping was getting farther away. A neighboring door slammed, and then there was a scream filled with pain and terror that made me drop the mug. It hit the floor and shattered. There was a heavy thud from behind the wall, followed by the sound of a bag falling to the floor and water pouring onto the concrete floor. I stood there unable to move out of fear. At that moment it felt like my whole body was made of wood. I could only breathe heavily. There were sounds of footsteps coming down the hallway. They were moving towards the next door. I grabbed my phone and texted one of the orderlies. The notification beeped in the hallway outside the door. An orderly walked into my room. Footsteps were heard in the hallway. We looked at each other fearfully. The footsteps started getting farther away and then quieted down. After waiting for a while, we left the room. A trail of blood stretched across the hallway. We walked slowly across the concrete floor to the next door. It was a staff room. Looking into the room, I was horrified. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered in brown blood. Chunks of human flesh were lying everywhere. As we stood motionless, there was a sound at the end of the hallway. I turned in that direction and saw that some monster in tattered clothes was standing there. With one hand, he was holding the corpse of an orderly by the leg. Meanwhile, the creature and the corpse started walking towards us. We rushed towards the emergency exit. I prayed to God that it was not closed. Heavy footsteps sounded behind us, and they were getting faster by the second. In a panic, we ran into one of the rooms and slammed the door shut. We found ourselves in total darkness. Suddenly something fell to the floor with a metallic sound, as if the lid of a giant pot had fallen off. It was a barrel of biomaterial. A bald human head with holes instead of eyes emerged from the barrel. Thin streams of some murky liquid were coming out of its torn mouth. When I looked back, I saw an open door that led outside. We got out into the street and ran from there for a long time. We stopped after a couple blocks, sat in some yard right on the lawn and called the police and an ambulance. Literally a couple days later, I transferred to another university on the other side of town. As for the second orderly that the creature dragged through the hallways, he was never found. I have terrible dreams at night, but I think I'm safe now.